Good morning, Year 6, and welcome to this reading skills lesson with me, Mr. Long. Today, I thought I would introduce you to some Charles Dickens. I've got this book at home, and it's an illustrated Usborne book of different Charles Dickens stories. They're really great because they get you familiar with the individual stories, like Oliver Twist and A Christmas Carol, etc., but aren't quite as difficult to read as the original Victorian text. There's similar books like this for Shakespeare as well, which is and for ancient Greek gods, which gives you a good opportunity to learn some famous stories without having to try and work out exactly what the old-fashioned text is trying to say. So this is the book I've got, and today I thought I would introduce you to Oliver Twist. I'm going to start at the second chapter. In the first chapter, Oliver Twist is born, but his mother dies in childbirth, so he's left an orphan and he's sent to a workhouse, which in Victorian times was kind of like a bit like a prison for children, where they had to work just to get enough support to put a roof over their head and for them to be fed. But they were treated really quite poorly, as you're about to find out. So here is chapter 2. If you wish, you can pause and not listen to my voice. Otherwise, you can read through this text as I read through. Chapter 2. More means less. By the time Oliver was 7, he was sleeping in a dormitory with 50 other starving boys. "I'm so hungry I could eat the boy in the next bed," complained a tall, strong boy with wild, angry eyes. Pause again if you don't want to hear me read. The boy in the next bed gulped. "You must have more food," he agreed hastily. "Let's draw straws to decide who's going to ask Mr. Bumble." Oliver's heart was thumping as he reached out to draw his straw. He pulled it close. "Oh no," he cried, "it's me." Supper, as usual, was gruel, a kind of thin, watery porridge with a few lumps of gristle floating in it. The boys lined up in front of Mr. Bumble, who stood at one end of the dining room, a huge apron tied around his fat belly, ladling a small spoonful into each boy's bowl. They returned to their tables to eat their food, packed on benches as tight as sardines, though not so plump. Their bowls never needed washing. They licked it clean in seconds until they shone like polished china. The boys, sitting near Oliver, kicked him under the table. "Go on, Oliver. Ask now." Shivering with fear, Oliver walked the length of the room. He clutched his bowl so tightly his knuckles gleamed white. A terrible silence descended, pierced by Oliver's slow, echoing footsteps on the stone floor. He passed table after table of boys, their spoons laid down, their empty bowls in front of them. Each round-eyed boy stared at him expectantly as he went by. Oliver guessed what they were thinking. "I'm glad it's him, not me." At last he reached Mr. Bumble, who looked down his nose at Oliver as though he were an insect he wanted to squash. Oliver forced himself to speak. "Please, sir, I want some more," he whispered. "What?" shouted Mr. Bumble. "Please, sir, I want some more." Mr. Bumble swelled like an evil giant. His eyes bulged with fury. His face went purple. "More? How dare you, wicked boy!" He seized Oliver, hit him with the gruel ladle, and threw him into the coal cellar, locking the door. "Your punishment starts here," he bellowed. Oliver heard him stump up the steps, muttering as he went. "No one's ever asked me for more before. Mark my words, he'll be a criminal when he grows up. That boy will hang." In the excuse me, in the dark, sooty cellar, cobwebs stroked Oliver's face like creepy fingers, and rats scratched the walls. He crouched in the corner, pressing himself close to the wall, its hard, cold surface almost protective in the lonely gloom. He stayed awake all night, dreading what would happen to him next. And that's the end of our text. That's the end of chapter 2. And if I speak to you throughout the week and you quite like to hear more of this story, we might continue when I do each reading skills each week. Not every day, but probably every Tuesday. So I've got some questions for you. From the second page, questions 1, 2, 3, and 4 here, if you've got your pencils ready. And you can pause to read these questions. I'll read them out, and then I'll give the answers at the end. Question 1 is a retrieval question. How did the boys decide who was to ask Mr. Bumble for more food? Question 2, this is an explain. What type of food was gruel? Question 3, infer or inference. Why did the boys lick their bowls clean in seconds? And question 4 is a vocab question. What simile does the author use to describe how the boys are sat at the table? So you can pause now and answer these questions. Otherwise, I'm going to answer them straight away. By the way, the questions are all related to these 2 pages. So here we go. I might use my highlighter, I think. Let's see. Sorry, highlighter. I'll underline with red pen. So, how did the boys decide who was to ask Mr. Bumble for more food? They were to draw straws. That's basically when you put straws of different length and you pull them out. Whoever gets the shortest straw loses. What type of food was gruel? It says here, supper as usual was gruel. It's a kind of thin, watery porridge with a few lumps of gristle floating in it. So like a watery soup, but if you use the words that were there, you couldn't go wrong. Inference. Why did the boys lick their bowls clean in seconds? It said here, they were licked clean in seconds until they shone like polished china. And the sentence before says their bowls never needed washing. Now the answer to this question isn't why the boys licked their cleaners because they needed washing. The answer is they were licked clean in seconds because they were so hungry and that's all they had to eat. So they were starving hungry. And question 4, vocab. What simile does the author use to describe how the boys are sat at the table? And if we look over here, it says they returned to their tables to eat their food, packed on benches as tight as sardines. There's our simile, as tight as sardines, although it says not as plump. So not with even as much meat as little sardines. I've got some more questions for you on the next page. Next set of questions. Find a word that means fell or dropped. I'll give you a clue. It's on this first page here. Question 6, a retrieval question. What does Oliver guess the other boys are thinking? And your final question for reading skills today, what simile does the author use to describe how Mr. Bumble looks at Oliver? Pause now to answer these questions, otherwise I will give you them straight away. Okay, so the word that means fell or dropped is descended. It also means to descend is to go downstairs. And we sometimes use it in maths as well, don't we, for ascending order and descending order. A terrible silence descended. It means a terrible silence fell on the place. Question 6, retrieval. What does Oliver guess the other boys are thinking? Well, each round-eyed boy stared at him expectantly as he went by. Oliver guessed what they were thinking. He guessed, I'm glad it's him, not me. Hope you got that. I'm glad it's him, not me. And finally, your last question for reading skills today. What simile does the author use to describe how Mr. Bumble looks at Oliver? So we want another simile. So it says, Mr. Bumble, who looked down his nose at Oliver, and here comes the simile, as though he were an insect he wanted to squash. So that's the whole simile. He looked down his nose at Oliver as though he were an insect he wanted to squash. Well, that's the end of chapter 2 of Oliver Twist. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed that reading skills lesson. I'll talk to you throughout the week, and if you did, we'll do some more next week to find out what happens to Oliver Twist next. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.